We've previously talked about eukaryotic cells, specifically plant and animal cells and their important organelles. In today's lesson, we will focus on the cell membrane. There are different names we can use for the cell membrane. It can be called phospholipid bilayer, a plasma membrane, or fluid mosaic model. The cell membrane is important to any cell. It helps to maintain homeostasis or a balance because it controls what enters and what leaves the cell. Important things need to enter like food, water, and oxygen for the cell to survive. But things also need to leave the cell. The cell needs to release waste, excess water, and carbon dioxide. For this reason, we can say that the cell membrane is selectively or semi-permeable. This means that only certain things are selected to pass through. It's like a door screen. This door screen allows only air to pass through, but keeps insects, leaves, and animals out. Pause the video to answer the stop and jot question and ask the teacher to check your answer. The cell membrane is made of individual pieces called phospholipids. It has two parts, a head and a tail. The head is made up of a phosphate. That's why we call it a phospholipid. The head is also a polar molecule. A polar molecule has charges, making it easier to stick to other things like water. The head is hydrophilic. Hydro means water, and philic means loving, so the hydrophilic heads like to be near water. The tails are nonpolar, so they have no charge and they don't like to stick to other things like water. That's why we say it is hydrophobic. Hydro means water, and phobic means fearing. The tails hate to be near water. Now that we've seen how one phospholipid looks like, let's take a look at how a whole cell membrane is arranged. Phospholipids are arranged into two layers. That's why we say another name for the cell membrane is called a phospholipid bilayer. Inside and outside of the cell, there is a lot of water. Because of this, the hydrophilic heads face the inside and the outside of the cell since they love water. The hydrophobic tails are facing each other because they don't want to get near the water. There's no water in this area. Pause the video to answer the stop and jot question and ask the teacher to check your work. Not only is the phospholipid bilayer made of lipids, it also has proteins. There are three types of proteins and they have different functions. Proteins can be used for transportation. Sometimes large materials like carbohydrates and proteins have difficulty passing straight through the cell membrane. In this situation, they use proteins as a doorway to move through the cell membrane. Another function of proteins is communication. Cells need to communicate with each other to make sure they're doing things properly. And lastly, proteins are also used for identification. Cells need to identify themselves to other cells to know which are good and which are bad for the body. The phospholipid bilayer is also made up of other molecules called cholesterol, which is another type of lipid. They look like honeycombs within the cell membrane. They help to maintain fluidity. What is fluidity? Well, it sounds like fluid, and fluids flow, they change shape, and they interact with their environment to change their shape. We want our cell membrane to do the same exact thing. We don't want our cell membrane to stay the same shape, be stiff or rigid, not be able to bend or be manipulated by the things around it, because if it was solid, then things wouldn't be able to pass through. So to recap, the cell membrane is made of individual pieces called phospholipids. The phospholipids have a polar hydrophilic head and a non-polar hydrophobic tail. These phospholipids are arranged into two layers. The hydrophilic heads face inside and outside of the cell, while the hydrophobic tails face each other. Other molecules like proteins and cholesterol help the cell membrane to work properly. Now take a look at the video clip on today's Moodle. Afterwards, answer the stop and jot question and ask the teacher to check your answer.